All right, another fantastic day here in the KQCK studio. It is 6:15 and time for our weekly show, Money and Motivation with Nancy Fleming. Welcome, Nancy.
Well, good afternoon, Joe. What is it, 111 degrees outside today?
At least. That's the low end.
It's 106.3 right now, but I think it was about 140, it felt like.
Yeah,
Wow.
it has felt so hot the last few days.
When I ran out and got my beverage, it was 111. I filled it with ice. Let's just put it there.
Gotta
Sucked
do
on
that.
the ice. Just had flavored ice. So tonight we have a really special show. We did a joint, meaning me and Mark Windsor, did a joint interview with Kirk Adams, who is running for office, and we're going to show that again because when we look at how we make our money and when we look at retirement or even as we're accumulating money, government policy, taxes, regulations, sometimes they can just make a law that just flat out puts somebody out of business, is really important to our bottom line. We reach into our pockets and take money out in the form of taxes to pay people to represent us in the federal government, and often we feel like we are not being represented. Often we feel like only special interests are being represented. So I feel like from an economic standpoint, it's really important to understand the mindset of those running for office, and will they really represent us, and, well, quite frankly, will they watch out for our wallet, not their own? And the reason I say that is when we look to see the people who have managed to accumulate success, and for the sake of conversation, we'll use the term $1 million. That's a nice round number. I mean, they even have a show. Who wants to be a millionaire?
Gotta love that.
Yeah,
I know I'm ready.
Are you? And
Absolutely.
I bet, Scott, are you ready?
Definitely,
I
yeah.
forgot we have Scott Walker, attorney Scott Walker, sitting in with us for a little bit today. And it's so nice to have you. What type
Thank
of
you.
law do you practice?
I do a number of things. My main focus is real estate, residential real estate, but I also do a lot of things actually related to finance. I do some bankruptcy law, but take kind of a different approach where we like to look at a whole picture and try to figure out, what can you do with your assets, what can you do with your property to really put you in the best financial situation possible. So I do a lot of that, and as well as some business law.
Super. So I think you would agree that government and tax policies have a lot to do with a person's success in every
absolutely,
real.
yeah.
And it's interesting because when we look at the way that people become successful, we'll define that by being worth $1 million, and we will include pensions in that because pensions are valuable with the dollars you'd have to have set aside for that income. Real estate is one way. If a person is an astute real estate investor, they know what they're doing. That is one of the several tracks that you can run on to become successful. Now, any of these tracks, of course, can blow up on you if you don't do it right. When we talk to people who are millionaires, contrary to some of the rhetoric out there today, they did build it themselves through hard work, wise investing, and frugality.
And knowing the right people to help them out, like yourself.
Exactly. Or
And
if
Scott.
if they need legal advice,
That's right.
The help comes from accounting, legal, and planning. And so getting the right advisor to help you with what you're doing
Is nothing but the most important thing there is.
It's really interesting. I was actually just having a conversation with somebody today who does some coaching for small businesses and that sort of thing. And we were discussing how there tends to be that evolution of thought for business owners, and I think it's probably the same for anybody who builds wealth in any way, where you kind of start off just working to get the money, just doing the, put your shoulder to the wheel and just work to get the money. And then there seems to be this evolution that you start to realize, well, there's other things I can do that maybe isn't the grinding work, but it's other things to put my money in the right place, talk to the right people, to put these systems in place. And it seems like anybody building wealth after a while of just doing the work starts to come around to this idea that there are other things like talking to the right people and putting the right systems in place that will also help build the wealth.
That is true. And two other things with that, yes, you have to know the rules. And we find that millionaires have generally been conservative. So, I mean, granted, there's the few, that you hear that bought the Apple stock when it was so low. But those are not the norm. The norm are pretty conservative, so they didn't over-leverage their real estate, for example. Mm-hmm. They didn't go into super high-risk penny stocks, as another example. So real estate is one path. The second path is investing. If a person can get a good broker, they will be able, or if they're real good themselves, and if they just follow it, and by good we mean, if we look at a 7% return, that's a second path that a person can run on in order to be successful. And the third one you already mentioned, we find people who are successful as business owners. And often we're refer to the business owners as the real working class, because you're going to see business owners working better than 8 hours a day. I know I do. Most people I know work better than 8 hours a day for quite a few years. The payoff comes later on. Sometimes they don't have to put quite as many hours in, but especially when they're ready to transition to retirement, then if they've worked hard and haven't over-leveraged, then they're able to sell the business in a manner that gives them a stream of income, gives them a lump sum or whatever transition they plan to do. So, what do we do with everybody else? General retirement in the past has been, and still needs to be, a three-legged stool. So we've got the pension, Social Security, and our private investments. A number of the people we've mentioned won't have pensions, but Social Security is there, and then so would be our own investments. The problem we run into then is that the government keeps wanting to put their hands in our pockets. They want to take away the gains that we have on our investments, whether it's the capital gains tax, which means we do the exchanges, or whether they want the tax on our dividends, and then with small business owners, they have all kinds of fees and taxes. The last group of people, though, are people who do it the really old-fashioned way, and they work and they save. Now, what happens if a person reaches the age of 50-some years old and they don't have enough for retirement? What do you think they can do?
Well,
even 55.
Right. I think that's that question is why so many are still working beyond, well beyond 55. I think that the age-old, maybe not age-old, but I think that the traditional thought was, well, I can rely on my Social Security, and you would know more about this than me. But I mean, where are we with Social Security? I mean, I don't know that that's reliable for.
And did we have a call or a question?
We did. We had Carrie S. from Mesa wanting to know, when will the interview with Nancy and Kirk Adams going to be on?
Shortly. Shortly, when we're done talking about this, we will go on.
We'll just transition right into that?
We will transition right into the interview. It'll be on in just a few minutes. That interview, to me, was really important. I mentioned that there's a number of economic issues that are a big concern. And one of the things is that we have such a disastrous economy right now that I kind of feel sorry for anybody who gets elected. They're going to have to do some really tough things, and a lot of people are going to scream. And as I mentioned in the interview today, and I want to restate it because I don't think a lot of people are aware of this, because we went most of our history, we're a very prosperous country, and we were self-reliant and self-made, but right now, 40% of the money that our government is spending, they are either printing or they are borrowing, and mostly from China. Wow. And I don't think any of us really likes that scenario. So, and Social Security is a huge issue. And the reason Social Security is a huge issue is because we were given promises. We're forced to pay into Social Security, and we were promised we would have so much money. But we do not get the truth in a lot of reports that are issued by the government. I hope that doesn't surprise anybody. We often have to go to alternative sources, and so I did that. Now, Social Security themselves say that they expect that they're going to be broke in 2033, but I'm finding a lot of other sources, and especially a source that was a Dr. Alan Smith, who wrote a book, The Looting of Social Security. He is a professor of economics at Eastern Illinois University. He is saying that he thinks that'll happen in 2023. Right now, Social Security is unable to pay their benefits from current revenues. And this started last year. Now, this scares people. Then they think, oh, I should start now, get as much as I can. But in planning, we're attempting to help people maximize all of their Social Security benefits because it's one of these legs of the stool that we need to have. The sad thing is, with the way Social Security is today, that we ran surpluses with Social Security for 25 years because back in 1983 there was a payroll tax increase. The promise was, if this tax is passed, we will be able to save the surplus. What really happened, though? It was spent. The government went in, and instead we now have literally IOUs that are printed. So let me ask you this. If you went to a broker or anybody that you were having handle your money, and you said, I want it invested here, and they promised you a return. Maybe they were doing something safe, and you come back later and they say, oh, you know what, we put the money here, but then we decided we would just move it somewhere else, and it's gone, but we think you should give us more. I mean, would you really continue to work with that person?
I'd sue them.
Exactly. So where are we when we have elected representatives who we are supposed to trust in our best interest, but they're behaving in a manner that would put a Madoff, for example, behind bars, or any of our other brokers, if we put money in one account and they took it, or we put money in one account and they appropriated it someplace else. And that's what we're looking at here. So how do we get someone in that isn't going to do that? This other history, I think, really needs to be brought to mind as we watch, because I would like to see some transparency in our laws. But back in 1960, we had another really wonderful Supreme Court ruling. This was Fleming versus Nestor, now not related to me. And they said the government does not have the legal obligation to repay money. They ruled that nobody has, quote, a contractual earned right to Social Security benefits. Now, with the latest Social Security rulings, we know that just about anything can happen. It's all fair game out there. And then back in 1935, we had Section 1104, for anybody who wants to check it out. The right to alter, amend, or repeal any provision of this act is hereby reserved to Congress. I doubt that this was made public to the people at the time when this act was passed, because it was passed in order for people to have a more secure retirement. Now, this is pretty strong language. Now, if we have this in this program, and with all that's going on with our money, we just, for example, had Medicare money that was taken and moved over to the IRS. I feel like it's a fiduciary responsibility when a program is set up and when the citizens pay into the program, that the same standard is held to our elected officials that are held to us. If the money goes in a certain place, then it needs to stay there. And the thing is, we have this mess today, and do we have elected officials that will repay Social Security? Can they put the lost money back into Social Security? And this is why we're doing some interviews with some of the politicians to get a read on how they feel about their duties. Not that they can necessarily go in and change the past, but going forward, how are they going to feel and how are they going to act given the situation that we are in today? So I think with that, we will go ahead and transition over to the interview and listen to that. So take it away, Joe.
All right, here we go. This is the interview with Kirk Adams, running for United States House of Representatives, with Nancy Fleming and Mark Windsor.